Hello, Brobs. We're back with The Making of a Vampire, Paracelsus, Rabbi Loew, Saint Germain, Dracula by Alexander Şendrea. Chapter, what is this, 5? I believe it's 5, but I could be wrong. Don't matter. Doesn't matter. Don't matter, bruv. Yossel, the Golem. It's a pretty long chapter, so I'll have to divide it and chew. Conceptually, the golem was much older than the homunculus. It was as old as Adam himself. In the Talmudic tradition, the first man had been a golem, that is, a body without a soul, during the first 6 hours of his existence. The Judaist Abbat de Rabbi Nathan describes how God created Adam from dust. In the first hour, the dust was collected. In the second, his form was created. In the third, he became a shapeless mass, golem. In the fourth, his members were joined. In the fifth, his apertures opened. In the sixth, he received the soul. There's the werewolf. The soul was given to Adam in the moment when God breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. This phrase, breath of life, is a symbol that stands for any source of radiant energy capable of creating life. It is the core of, or the ultimate goal in, any research or endeavor concerning the creation of a homunculus. For Paracelsus, it meant blood. For Paholka, love. For wise Rabbi Loew of Prague, it meant word. If you're listening to this, I suggest you go back to the last chapter in this video rendering and read about or listen to me incoherently read about Paracelsus and Paholka. It's a rather good story. When the weak vampire Dracula left Paholka's cottage in a hurry, frightened by Paracelsus's cross, he found himself lost in the gloomy and cold world of the hereafter. He was still unable to attack humans and suck their blood, and still too inexperienced to hypnotize. The sylph Melis, who that night wandered across the country with the freezing wind, told him to go to Prague. This famous city has a quarter, the ghetto, Melis said, and there lives wise Rabbi Loew, an expert Kabbalist and sorcerer, thoroughly versed in the arts of witchcraft, knowledgeable in the supernatural, endowed with both majesty and erudition, friendly to demons, producer of influential amulets, and extremely successful in his dealings with the worlds of the uncanny and natural. He has plenty of blood at his disposal from the fowls and animals he sacrifices according to the kosher rituals. It was not exactly the kind of blood needed by Dracula, but Sylph Melis advised the vampire to go there anyhow and make himself known to Loew. The rabbi knew thoroughly the psyche of his ghetto, which was a strange mixture of saintliness and squalid evil, and could perhaps find a way to help the vampire. So this guy's saying that Dracula knew Rabbi Loew. Okay. The rumor has it, Melis said further, that Rabbi Loew was versed in killing Christian children, and if this is true, you can find there a fine and abundant source of your natural food. Moreover, as long as you stay within the limits of the ghetto, you'll never see again the sign of the cross, which is so harmful to your health. Now, this part of the legend relating to the killing of Christian children is known to be completely obsolete. The Jews were civilized and law-abiding people, and only a boor would accuse them today of killing children for their rituals. But at that time, Prague considered them strange. They retained their old mode of dressing, which seemed weird to their neighbors. They lived in a ghetto, which was a sordid area of the city with narrow, stinky streets and crowded, unhealthy houses. Their peep through oriental, half-closed eyelids and aquiline, well-marked nose seemed aggressive or menacing. Today, the same ghetto is visited by tourists from all over Europe and is considered one of the most uncommon and dramatic sights of Prague. However, at that time, during the 15th and 16th centuries, the inhabitants of Central Europe were as superstitious as the people of the Middle Ages, and when the body of a child was found on a remote street, particularly on the eve of Jewish holidays, people blamed the Jews with that killing. When the small body was found drained of blood, people suspected the Jews of using the blood to prepare their matzah, shemura, guarded matzah, for the Seder ceremony and Passover. From here to persecution was only one step. Under the circumstances, Rabbi Loew was said to be the creator of a powerful artificial being, the Golem, who was employed to revenge the Jews for the sufferings they experienced in Prague during that time. Several writers of the 17th century, such as Zvi Chacham and Naphtali Cohen, painstakingly narrated how Loew made the Golem out of mud taken from the Moldau riverbed, the river that crosses Prague. However, an earlier legend, which was in circulation at the beginning of the same century, that is much nearer to Loew's life, asserted something particularly significant for this story, that Rabbi Loew used two demons in the process of creating the Golem. One of these, Yossel, half spirit and half man, had some traits comparable to the vampire, who was also half spirit and half man. Before being called Yossel on earth, this demon was called Son of the Devil, Dracula in Latin. The vampire arrived exhausted in Prague one rainy night before Passover, when the rabbi prepared ordinary matzah and mitzvah matzath for the Passover festival. And I'm sure I botched most of those words and those in the preceding and etc. sections. Rabbi Loew's kitchen was small, lighted by two tapers and fully heated by an antique stove of cast iron. On the table, there were all sorts of good things. First, there was dough made of flour and fresh water. The flour was not brought in the market, but obtained exclusively from grain grown on land owned by Orthodox Jews, reaped and ground by them. Then there were perforated cakes, round and triangular, honey, fruit juices, and eggs, a zeidel, a wheel with sharp teeth for the perforation of the cakes, and matzah, shemura, the matzah of watching. A piece of matzah was hanging on a wall as a remembrance of the Exodus. Beneath it, there was a piece of matzah from the afikomen, the piece hidden during the Seder. Possessing higher talismanic properties, on a shelf, there was a cup of fresh blood sitting on ice. The windows were carefully protected against eavesdroppers and spies by heavy wooden shutters. When the rabbi pressed near one of the windows, he was startled to see between the shutter and the window, and spread on the entire wooden panel of the shutter, but almost squashed in that narrow space, a thin, coiled, trembling, ghostly form whose phosphorescent eyes looked with unnatural greed at the cup of blood. Let's see if we can find this. Figure 28. Oh no. These figures are not very good, but whatever. Is this him? Is that Dracula? No, it's 32. Dracula. I'm Dracula. There's 28. Is this him? Mother frappa. That's going to be a difficult one. Is this 28? Yeah, that's him. The greedy gaze of the vampire as he appeared at Rabbi Loew's window one rainy night of April 1599. It looks like the Golem from, what's his name's? Melnink's book. Two white teeth were protruding from beneath the crimson lips of there's Satan, of the creature. It was something like a humble prayer and painful supplication in those greedy, vacillating eyes that impressed the rabbi very much and wiped out of his mind any trace of fear. He opened the window and let the demon in, like a wavering shadow of a Walpurgis night, or a tatterdemalion blown away by the wind from some satanic Sabbath, his loose cape pouring with cold rain and leaving large puddles on the floor. The creature went straight to the shelf and with uncontrollable haste grabbed the cup of blood, and emptied it at one gulp. Then, to the rabbi's astonishment, the demon went torpid, like an animal in hibernation, and dropped into a chair. Blood mixed with bubbles of saliva ran from one corner of his mouth to the other and flowed down over the chin and unto the neck. The rabbi came nearer to inspect the strange pallor of the creature. At that particular moment after the bloody dinner, his white skin was pulsating from underneath, and the phosphorescent eyes seemed set between swollen lids. Under the intense look of the creature, the rabbi went back to the window and shut it. Then he moved to the door that led to the adjoining room, reserved for those who actually backed the matzah, and locked it. He then sat down at the opposite corner of the table near the oven and observed for a long while the surprising visitor he had admitted into his kitchen. They were seated at the same table, the man and the demon, and looked curiously at each other in the yellow reddish light of the tapers. The only noise in the kitchen came from outside, the monotonous tapping of the rain on the pebbles of the street. During that period of observing the vampire, Rabbi Loew made use of his liaisons in the world of hereafter and received silently all available information about his visitor. He understood the creature's need of blood. He foresaw the tremendous power he could transfer to that slim, shivering body and how useful that being could be to defend his congregation from the Golem. He was desperately in need of a helping force because on the previous night a corpse of a child completely drained of blood had been found on the outskirts of Prague, and the rabbi learned that his neighbors were preparing to attack the synagogue. The rabbi was worried because the synagogue, the Alt-New School, Figure 29, as it was called in the congregation, was a newly restored and well-equipped structure, recently rebuilt with the discreet aid of certain rich moneylenders. The building was strong and was intended to last over centuries as the center of Judaism in Central Europe for the benefit of the whole continent. Any attack against it, followed by a possible destruction of the building, would have meant the smashing of all efforts to have Judaism established in Prague as a radiating source of wisdom and culture. It was therefore compulsory that a possible attack be prevented by a Jewish force of shock. The creature was the best opportunity to implement that plan. When the demon awoke from his state of torpor, Rabbi Loew had a long talk with him. Next day, he had a discussion with his counselors. The decision was taken to give the ghost Tychon resuscitation, that is, human life and vigor. For this, the rabbi took mud from the Moldau River, gave it shape, and modeled it as a man, then with the help of two demons fused the vampire into the muddy human form. Thus the golem was created and became a living body, half demon and half man. We have to go look at these things. These figures are not very good. Is that the old school? That's figure 40. I hate turning these pages. I'm just going to wreck this book. What's this? Is this him? That's figure 34. I wish this guy would have just put all the figures in the middle of the book. All right, there's 31. Oh my God. This is the creature from the goddamn Black Lagoon. Oh my God. The golem made of clay by Rabbi Loew moves against the enemies of the Jews. I'm pretty sure he moves against the actual art of the act of art. There's the new synagogue. I'm not turning to those anymore. I keep saying that, but this time I must be resolute. The new being was created with only a limited type of intelligence. Doet, knowledge. He could not be infused with the other two types, Chakma, wisdom, and Bina, judgment, because these two types were strictly dependent on Neshama, the light of God, and were not permitted to go as down as the demon's level of existence. However, The golem was endowed with nefesh, sensory organs, with emphasis on sex. His dick had 9 inches. What the fuck? His dick had 9 inches. He was exempt from the observation of the laws of both command and prohibitory, being therefore free to follow and make use of his base instincts. You should have just gone on to Pornhub. After several conjurations, whose secret wording was known to the wise rabbi alone, and a sustained period of nutrition with natural food, the golem grew stronger day after day and developed remarkable static powers. At that moment of the growth, the rabbi placed under the golem's tongue a small amulet with the word emet, truth, written on it in Hebrew. It was a magic word whose property was to transfer to the golem dynamic forces at the command of the rabbi. When the first letter, aleph in Hebrew, was erased from the amulet, there remained the word met, death, and the golem's forces were halted. When the letter aleph was restored, the forces revived. The rabbi made several experiments with the magic word, first ordering the golem into a tremendous dynamic power, then slowing him down or even blocking him off. Then the rabbi gave him a name, Yossel. It was the name of one of the two demons who had helped the rabbi. Eventually, Loew gave the golem a place in a corner of his courtyard. Now Yossel was always seen sitting in that corner at the edge of a table, his head resting on his hands, and moving, amazingly, only at the rabbi's command. He was a perfect tool, absolutely reliable. Because he had knowledge but not judgment, he could carry out orders like a machine that fulfills the will of the operator. The rabbi's intent was to give him such orders that would defend the Jewish community of all the miseries which it had to endure from its enemies. Not long after this accomplishment, the rabbi had the opportunity to put the golem at work. There was a large empty manor across the street from the old new synagogue called the Fünfter Palast, or is it Palast? A half-crazy count had lived there many years before who never allowed people to look at him and had dug a tunnel under the mansion that led to a nearby dwelling called the Greenhouse. The tunnel sheltered, it was said, evil spirits that emerged from there in the silence of the midnight and haunted the palace. The Greenhouse was occupied by Rabbi Loew's archenemy, the Bohemian Thaddeus, who was a Christian. Thaddeus was interested in Jewish affairs and always did something to keep down Jewish activities, which, in his appreciation, were noxious to the population. He was far from being as knowledgeable as Loew in the field of the supernatural. However, he managed to get under his command 3 of the evil spirits that haunted the Fünfter. At that time, the people of Prague plotted to invade the Jewish quarter and destroy the synagogue. Rabbi Loew had learned of that plot, and the following morning, when a large number of men and women bearing sticks and torches suddenly appeared in the ghetto, Rabbi Loew was not surprised. He had already alerted the golem and ordered him to be ready for action at the first sign of danger. When the first row of people entered the narrow street between the synagogue and the Fünfter, howling defiance at the Jews and menacing with their heavy sticks and burning torches, the golem made use of his tremendous strength and knocked down 3 men and 2 women who led the crowd. The golem then grasped several sticks and torches from the hands of those who followed from the rear and broke them like matches before the astonished eyes of the attackers. The crowd was suddenly stricken with panic, and the women ran back in terror, but the golem had still the time to single out 2 plump females and to push them vigorously in the open caves of the palace, where no living thing had entered for many years. The 2 women's piercing yell of horror made everybody freeze for a moment. Then they all rushed away from there, and the narrow street remained clear and silent. The golem jumped down into the caves of the Fünfter, got hold of the 2 terror-stricken ninnies who hid themselves under a broken table, and rapaciously drained them of blood with much greed and delight. leaving the dried corpses on the spot for the further benefit of the palaced demons. Then the golem quietly went home, took his seat at the table in the corner of the garden, put his head on his crossed hands, and fell asleep. After that feast in the caves, he became stronger than ever. It happened that Thaddeus was working at a window of the greenhouse and watching the whole event. He had since long suspected the golem of supernatural powers, but had no material proof in support of his suspicion. Now he was convinced. He went down into the tunnel and entered the caves in the hope of finding the two women and rescue them. When he arrived on the spot, it was too late. He found all the demons of the caves, including the three who were obeying him, busy with scratching, biting, and otherwise torturing the two corpses left there by the golem. He tried to alert his friendly demons against the golem, but they were so busy with the corpses that they simply ignored him. It was a unique chance for those demons to deal with bodies which died without prayer, cross, and candle. However, when they finished their infamous work, they promised to get into action at midnight. When the first ray of the moon shone in the sky, it was on the waning crescent, a detail to be retained for future consideration. The three demons went out of the caves and approached the rabbi's house with the clear intent to cause damage. Wise Rabbi Loew, who had learned about their plans, ordered the golem to stay awake that night. Now a confrontation among demons involved special problems. For instance, it was not possible to knock down a demon in the human way of doing things because of the various uncanny powers invested in them. Even the golem, who was half demon, could not strike at his fellows unless the ground was especially prepared on his behalf as to allow him to make use of certain special advantages. Rabbi Loew knew how to prepare the ground. He had previously instructed the golem to eat a few scorched corks. It was written in the old books of witchcraft that scorched corks were incentive to farting, and that nothing stinks so horridly as a demon's fart. The stink was so offensive that even fellow demons were prostrated. This state of feeling was necessary to be created because only under such discomfort could a demon lose for a few instants the use of its uncanny powers. Only during this short time could a demon be knocked off its feet. When Thaddeus's demons entered furtively the rabbi's courtyard, Yossel the golem farted once in plain air, and the demons were overwhelmed by the terrible odor. At that precise moment, Yossel knocked them down with all his tremendous strength, so that all three of them hurried away from there, stunned and swaying like agonizing sick people. When Thaddeus ordered them to try again, they obeyed, but Yossel farted once more, then knocked them down pitilessly and chased them far away. After a while, they tried again to intrude on the rabbi's premises, but Yossel farted stronger than ever, crushed them badly, and sent them back to Funfer. Ashamed as they were, they did not dare to launch another attack. One of Thaddeus's young disciples, who next day learned of that nocturnal fight, asked his master why Yossel the golem had to use such a base method of overwhelming the three demons. "There is no other method," Thaddeus answered, "and it is peculiar to the world of demons. Their whole activity is related to the lower part of the body, and only by an action involving this part can somebody stop them. Unfortunately for us, wise Rabbi Loew knows even this small detail, so he is unsinkable, yes, but it's a pity that a knowledgeable individual like him resorts to such methods, thus pushing us to do the same ugly things. You cannot curb him. His expertise in such activities is inherited from his fathers and forefathers, whereas we have just started. He is an expert, and we are only beginners." Each time the Jewish congregation was in a bind because of Thaddeus or other Goyim's interferences, that golem acted so efficiently against the intruders, and the people of Prague were so frightened that nobody dared to attack the Jews anymore. The news about the Golem's performances reached the highest circles of the capital of Bohemia, and even the emperor's astrologer, the great Tycho Brahe, is it Brahe or Brach? Figure 31, whom Rudolph II, the Emperor of Bohemia, had called to Prague from Hamburg, was literally perplexed by what happened in the ghetto. Although Brahe, I thought it was Brahe, was highly versed in reading the signs of the sky, he had discovered the annual equations of the moon, foresaw the influence of the moon over humans, and produced the famous astronomical Rudolphine tables. He simply couldn't understand how Rabbi Loew had been capable of counteraction at the time of the waning crescent. As it was known at that time, the waning crescent had inhibitory nervous action over humans rather than excitatory. The emperor, on the other hand, was worried by what he considered a developing force within his kingdom that was controlled not by him, but by a stranger. He sent an emissary to Brahe to call him to the imperial residence, the Horadschen Castle, on the west bank of the Moldau, to discuss the matter. And we're going to stop there because I have about 7 pages to go and only about 6 minutes on my underwhelming Android phone camera. I don't know why it stops at 33 minutes. Probably something to do with the Illuminati, but who knows. Anyway, there you go, bros. That's all for now. Goodbye.